Good afternoon. I'm going to call this meeting of Assembly Natural Resources to order. Madam Secretary, please take the roll.
Assemblywoman Anderson. Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod. Assemblywoman Brown May. Assemblywoman Considine. Assemblyman DeLong.
Present.
Assemblywoman Duran. Assemblyman Gurr. Assemblywoman Hanson. Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch. Assemblyman Watts.
Here.
Assemblyman Nurick. Chair Cohen.
I'm present. Please mark Assembly members Bilbray Axelrod and Brown May absent, excused. Again, welcome. Some housekeeping before we get going. Please silence your electronic devices. If you wish to testify, please sign into the table by the door and provide a business card to the committee secretary. For those joining online, please be sure to mute your microphone when you're not speaking to minimize any background noise. When testifying, please turn on the microphone and clearly state your name and affiliation, if any, for the record. Then remember to turn off the microphone each time you're done speaking. As for handouts, please provide 15 copies for members of the public, and you should have provided copies or an electronic copy to our committee manager by 12 o'clock yesterday for members of the committees. We expect courtesy and respect in our interactions during the meetings, even if we don't agree with each other's positions. Please note, committee members will be using laptops and other electronic devices. Please don't take that as a sign of disrespect or inattentiveness. We will have 2 bill hearings today, plus public comment. We will be taking the bill hearings out of order. We'll start with Assembly Bill 184, and then we'll have Assembly Bill 84. So with that, I will open up the hearing on Assembly Bill 184, which establishes an incentive program for the purchase of certain zero-emission, medium-duty, and heavy-duty vehicles. Please note, I think we are going to limit testimony to 2 minutes per person in order to make sure that we can get through everyone's testimony, because I do believe we have a lot of people who want to testify on this bill. So with that, please go ahead, Assemblymember Watts, when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Howard Watts. I have the pleasure of representing Assembly District 15 in the heart of Clark County, and it's my pleasure to present Assembly Bill 184 for your consideration today. We do have a brief presentation. I'm joined by representatives from Western Resource Advocates, and are going to explain just a little bit about how this measure came to be and what it does. With the chair's indulgence, we'll provide some high-level context. I'll speak, followed by those joining me at the table. Then I will do a brief walkthrough of the bill and a proposed conceptual amendment, and then we're glad to take any questions that you have.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So we'll go on to the next slide. What Assembly Bill 184 seeks to do is to leverage federal funds to create a new incentive program, the Clean Trucks and Buses Incentive Program, to support the electrification of medium and heavy-duty vehicles. It is leveraging new funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law that is specifically dedicated towards reducing air pollution, specifically carbon pollution from our atmosphere. The goal is to house this program within the Division of Environmental Protection. They have significant experience running similar programs, both through the Diesel Emission Reduction Act, as well as administration of VW settlement funds, to do exactly this, to help replace polluting larger duty vehicles with cleaner alternatives, including electric vehicles. It provides support for small business owners, fleets, and public transit. So this applies to both public and private agencies. And it has a focus on small businesses, minority-owned businesses, and historically underserved communities. And one of the things for those who have especially had to deal with me on the Growth and Infrastructure Committee, one of the things that I'm really, really passionate about is making sure that we seize this momentous opportunity that these federal laws have provided in terms of resources. And so while the core of this program is to use some formula funding that we can count on coming to the state, by having this program set up, it positions us to apply for and hopefully successfully receive additional federal dollars to further amplify the impact of the program. So what are medium and heavy duty vehicles? This slide shows a wide range across different weight classes. So class numbers are assigned based on the various gross weights of vehicles. And to simplify some of that, because I think that really, this slide helps show the many different types of vehicles, but we're talking about a whole wide range of delivery vehicles, delivery trucks, moving vans, for a whole variety of different uses, semi-trucks, utility vehicles, including garbage trucks, as well as public transit buses and even school buses. These vehicles, I think it's worth noting, are going to be on our roads no matter what. No matter how much we improve our public transit system, we're still going to need that last mile delivery. We're still going to need those utility service providers. And we're going to hopefully continue to expand our use of public transit. And these vehicles in particular, as you'll hear, are disproportionate emitters of air pollution. And so one of the big goals of this program is to help reduce that air pollution. I'll say that this is also aligned with our economic development strategy. The latest GOED vision for the next 5 years is an electric, innovative, and connected future for the state of Nevada. And this fits right into continuing to accelerate our leadership in the electric vehicle sector and in clean technology, where we've already become a hub, and I think this will continue to put us on the track to become a national clean transportation leader. And again, we've done clean cars programs. We've led the way in developing an electric vehicle highway. We have additional funds coming to support the development of electric vehicle charging, both from the federal government, from utility investment. This is something that, again, we've done a lot to lead on, and I think this is a great next step in that direction. These investments save businesses money. They save taxpayer dollars when we look at our transit fleets. They attract companies here that are interested in sustainability, either in developing these technologies or utilizing them. They drive high-value vehicle sales and registrations within our state. So this is a huge economic opportunity for the state of Nevada. And every vehicle that we take off the road will significantly reduce air pollution, helping us with Clean Air Act compliance and improving public health. And I just want to note, because we're talking a lot about vehicles, some folks might be wondering why this is before the committee. Again, it's because the Division of Environmental Protection is going to be administering this program, and it's tied back to some of our clean air and air pollution reduction goals. A handful of states do have these programs, and again, I'm really excited about the opportunity to leverage some additional dollars. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to my co-presenters.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aaron Kressig with Western Resource Advocates. I'm going to provide a little bit more context on the medium heavy-duty vehicles. And so, as Assemblyman Watts mentioned, why electrify these large vehicles? And to summarize these graphs, the reason that these are a good target for electrification is that although medium and heavy duty vehicles only make up a small percentage of the total vehicles on the road, 5% nationally, they're responsible for a very high percentage of air pollutants that are emitted by the transportation sector. So when you look at on-road NOx emissions and on-road PM 2.5 emissions, which are a primary contributor to negative public health impacts. They are almost 50%, in the case of PM 2.5, 50% of transportation emissions from the on-road portion of the sector are from medium and heavy-duty vehicles. So you get a good bang for your buck in the public health perspective with every vehicle that you're able to electrify. One of these medium heavy-duty vehicles is going to drive a lot of miles, and it's going to be emitting quite a bit of air pollution. So each one that we're electrify, we're able to help drive down emissions across the state. And another component of this is that these medium and heavy-duty vehicles tend to operate disproportionately in communities that are already burdened by poor air quality. And so, when you look at this graph on the far right, it's just showing that, historically underserved communities, communities of color, tend to bear the highest portion of harm that come from on-road transportation emissions. So this isn't just about cleaning up our air, it's about cleaning up our air for those who need it the most. Next slide, please. So, there's been there's been several large federal laws that have been passed in recent years. The Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law are the most relevant for this discussion. And what this graph is showing here is that the Inflation Reduction Act did create a tax incentive for medium and heavy-duty vehicles. But even with that incentive, the price difference between a traditional fossil fuel-powered medium heavy-duty vehicle and a zero-emission one is still quite significant. So the bar I would direct you to on this graph is the light blue one. And what that shows is that the cost differential between a traditional vehicle and a zero-emission vehicle for different types of vehicles. So if you look at, for example, a transit bus, the difference between a zero-emission vehicle and a traditional one is still $400,000, according to these numbers from Resources from the Future. So even with the $40,000 incentive that's available through the Inflation Reduction Act, the $40,000 tax incentive, we're still looking at a large price parity difference. And, for some vehicles, it's a smaller difference. If you look at smaller vehicles like walk-in vans or cargo vans, it's a smaller number, but it's still significant. So incentive programs like this one can help close that gap that are still present even after the tax incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act. Next slide, please. And as Assemblyman Watts mentioned, these type of voucher programs have been operating for a number of years in other states. And these are just a few examples that we've listed here. And they've leveraged a number of different funding sources, including funding sources from the Federal Highway Administration, the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program, the Carbon Reduction Program that is the primary source of seed funding sought out in this legislation is also from the Federal Highway Administration, so there's a lot of similarities there. Just to point out a couple, and not to go through all of these, but some of the most successful ones, the New York Voucher Incentive Program has been running for about 10 years now and has helped to get hundreds of electric trucks on the road. It has been funded in large part through federal funding from the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Act, so in many ways similar to what's being proposed here, as well as other sources of funding like the VW Settlement Fund and others. Some of the other ones are a little bit newer. The New Jersey program just has been around since 2021, already has awarded $40 million in grants in just over a year and a half. Massachusetts program, also only about 2 years old and already supported 222 vouchers for trucks. And Drive Clean Truck Illinois, one of the early versions of a voucher program, also funded through federal funding from the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program. And I think just to summarize here, one of the facts that we find very interesting is that when you look at the zero-emission medium heavy-duty trucks that are on the road today, 80% of those trucks are in states that have incentive programs like the one that's being proposed in this legislation. And with that, I'll pass it on to Drew Marion.
Thank you so much, Aaron, and thank you, Assemblyman Watts, and thank you, Commission, for listening to our presentation. I just want to go over a little bit about how this incentive program would be funded. Oh, sorry. My name is Jamarian Williams. I'm with Western Resource Advocates. So I want to go over a little bit about how this program would be funded. So it's going to be funded through the Carbon Reduction Program, and this is a new program that was created through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. It's for projects designed to reduce carbon dioxide emissions from on-road highway sources. So the Carbon Reduction Program can be used for a variety of projects, including medium heavy-duty vouchers, as long as they demonstrate three things. They would have to demonstrate that it would support a deployment of alternative fuel sources, reduce the environmental and community impacts of freight movement, as well as demonstrate reductions in transportation emissions over their lifespan, which this incentive program would do. 35% of Nevada's allocated carbon reduction program funding can be used in any manner that the state sees fit, as long as it meets those objectives that I laid out before. The carbon reduction program, it's a formula program, which means that it doesn't require any competitive applications, and it's automatically allocated to Nevada. So in this slide, we're going to go over a little bit about the proposed carbon reduction program allocations for this program. So like I touched on earlier, 35% of Nevada's carbon reduction program funding would be allocated towards this program. So for the first year, 2024, we see $3,997,000 going to this program. In 2025, a little over $4 million, $4,078,732. In 2026, $4.1 million would be allocated towards this Clean Trucks and Buses incentive program. Since it's seed funding, that means that it directs NDEP to seek additional funding from new federal competitive grant funding sources. So we have the Clean Heavy Duty Grants Program, Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, as well as the Diesel Emission Reduction Act funds. And the thing about this program is when you have a dedicated clean trucks program, it makes Nevada more competitive to seek additional federal funding, which is what we want. So this last slide is going to kind of go over the incentive amount. So Assemblyman Watts, he did say that there's going to be adders depending on for minority-owned businesses, small businesses, public schools. But I also want to go over the base incentive levels for each vehicle type. So for your Class 2B, the base level funding that you can expect is $20,000. For Class C, $50,000. For Class 4, $65,000. For Class 5, $75,000. For Class 6, $90,000. For Class 7, $135,000. And those are when you get to your larger vehicles. For Class C, $175,000 would be the base incentive for these vehicles. The adders that I mentioned before. So I do want to speak that you wouldn't be able to qualify for more than 2 of these adders. So minority and veteran-owned, they will get a 5% increase. Small business, they would get a 20% increase. Independent owner or operators would get a 33% increase for this incentive program. For transit authorities, the 10% increase, as well as public schools, they also get a 10% increase. And for public schools that are in underserved communities, we're looking at a 20% increase for this incentives for the adders for it. So that's going to conclude our presentation. Thank you so much for listening.
Howard Watts for the record. So again, I'll briefly walk through the provisions of the bill. So sections 2 through 15 provide various definitions that are referenced throughout the bill. Section 16 is essentially standing up the program by creating a dedicated account, authorizing the division to seek additional funding to supplement the program. And then Section 17 was what really stands up the program. A few of the key things, it essentially tasks the division with creating a framework of what vehicles are going to be eligible, the sellers that are going to be participating in this process, because it really involves a collaboration of working with the manufacturers to make sure that we know which vehicles are eligible for the program. It also includes upfit or retrofit vehicles, and then those who are completing the sale, which may be a manufacturer, may be a dealer, and then the purchaser. Again, you'll see the base incentive levels in section 17 sub 4. And again, that goes back to one of the slides that was presented. So what we've seen is that cost differential grows as the size of the vehicle increases. And so we've also phased the incentive levels to adjust as those vehicle ratings increase. Following that, sub 5 discusses these kind of multipliers, including independent truck operators, small businesses, minority-owned businesses, RTCs, and schools. And you'll see it includes school districts, charter schools, or university school for profoundly gifted pupils. In other words, every school entity that we discuss in the state. Section 18 discusses some additional details around how the process is supposed to work, and again, requiring that collaboration between the different entities to make sure everything's put together. And one of the things that I don't know if we covered before is the goal of this is to, again, reach that cost parity. And there's actually some controls in place in this policy to make sure that this would only get you to cost parity with a diesel or fossil fueled counterpart. So there's some work done here to figure out what that is, and no matter what adders or multipliers you had, the goal is to reach cost parity. But it is worth noting that there are significant fueling and maintenance savings on these vehicles compared to internal combustion engine vehicles over the life of the vehicle. It also has some other things to make sure that some of that we're in alignment with some of the federal policy objectives and goals. Section 19 again discusses the application process to ensure that the voucher is issued. Section 20 has some of the requirements for somebody seeking to obtain one of these vehicles, including how long the vehicle must be operated here, that it must be domiciled within this state, that it will operate for a certain amount, at least a certain amount of time per year, and that it will be operated primarily within this state. And I'll also speak to that in the conceptual amendment. Section 21 essentially has a review process for applications on a quarterly basis to see who's interested in participating and make those determinations so that sales can proceed, but also that there's a little bit of a timeline and a structure so that this doesn't become a kind of overwhelming constant process. So that there's a period to apply, to be considered based on the funding that's available. Then there'll be some decisions made, and others that the funds might not be available for at that time may be waitlisted and considered in the next round. And again, one of the things that is involved in this evaluation and determining who gets these incentives is, again, are they operating in some of these historically underserved communities? Do they qualify for some of those multipliers? Because again, I think impacting our transit fleets, helping our small businesses are things that should give a little bit of a preference when applications are being considered with others. And that is really kind of the quick summary of the bill. I'm glad to take any additional questions that folks have. But I would like to also address a conceptual amendment that should be provided to members of the committee. It really has a few key elements. One is amending the program language, so when we have that multiplier for minority businesses, we just want to make sure that covers all the different categories that we've already included in other areas of statute, making sure that women-owned business is included. I think that's particularly appropriate today on International Women's Day, as well as LGBTQ-owned businesses. We, in conversations with different stakeholders, decided to adjust the caps on this program. So we know that there are some large entities that could potentially procure a lot of vehicles, and we don't want them to be left out of the process, but we also, again, want to make sure that there's plenty of room for smaller businesses to have a bite at the apple. And so originally we looked at capping what could be received in a given year of 5 vehicles, and then with 10 for some of our fleet operators, our school buses and our RTCs. We're proposing to move those up to 10 and 15. Again, so that it provides a little bit of additional opportunity for some of the larger operators, including our fleets, but still make sure that there's going to be ample opportunity for smaller operators. We've proposed modifying some of those requirements that I just referenced in Section 20, having it domiciled and operating in the state for 3 years instead of 5, and changing the requirement that it be operated at least 75% of the time in the state to the majority of the time. The idea behind this, again, is the whole goal is to improve air quality in Nevada. And so even if a vehicle is based here, if it's spending most of its time out of the state, those air quality benefits aren't accruing here. But we do know that we have connections with neighboring states, and there may be operators that are going back and forth. And so we felt that changing that to majority of the time just provides a little bit better leeway to some of the folks that are engaging in those activities. And finally, we want to make clear that the division has the ability to penalize an eligible entity if they fail to comply with some of those requirements. We're going to kind of leave it up to them to determine exactly what that looks like, but want to make sure that there is some teeth behind upholding their end of the bargain. A couple of things I just want to note really quickly. When it comes to amendments, we've had ongoing conversations with various stakeholders about streamlining some of the language in the bill, maybe allowing for more of this process to be developed in a regulatory process. And so we'll probably be coming with some additional amendments for consideration along those lines. We've had ongoing conversations with the Nevada Department of Transportation on the program structure and making sure that it complies with federal law. And so we're probably going to have some language tweaks to exactly how it's set up to ensure that that can happen and that there's a proper partnerships put in place with the Division of Environmental Protection so that we can get those funds from the Federal Department of Transportation to NDOT and then to our experts in the state at running these types of programs. It was also brought to my attention fairly late that at least in Section 8, it's not entirely clear that state agencies would be eligible to participate in this program. And so we will be making an adjustment there as well, so that not only can our school districts and our RTCs take advantage of this, but NDOT, for example, has a significant fleet of larger duty vehicles and would want any eligible entity to be able to take advantage of that. In closing, this is something that will be really beneficial to continue to advance innovation and leadership in this sector. These prices, just like other clean technologies, have declined fairly rapidly over time. These carbon reduction program funds are right now, again, this program envisions 3 years of that funding. And then, potentially that could be expanded. Potentially we can bring in some additional resources. But this is intended to help in the near term, help drive that innovation as the technology is scaling and the costs are coming down. The one thing I did want to note, we talk a lot about electrification. And I do want to note that in the definition of zero emission vehicles, it does include hydrogen fuel cell technology as well, which does generate electricity. So they're still, in a sense, electric powered, but just wanted to be clear that the definition of zero emissions technology is broader than purely electric powered, battery powered technology. And with that, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and glad to answer any questions that members of the committee may have.
Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. I do have a couple of questions for Assemblymember LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this because I do think vehicle emissions is something we need to be tackling. So my questions are all on page 6. I have a question on section 18 when it talks about the final assembly of the truck or bus must be in the United States. I wondered if that was to meet a federal requirement because I know that there are some vehicles where 90% are made in the U.S. and then it's finally assembled somewhere else and that causes challenges.
Thank you for that question, Assemblywoman. Howard Watts for the record. Yes, so both the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act had some Buy American provisions within it. This is the simplest way that we could find to make sure that that is addressed. That's a big conversation, not just in medium and heavy duty, but also in light duty, so passenger, kind of everyday vehicles. And, I know that several companies are now looking to develop plants and other facilities here in the U.S. so that they can qualify for tax credits and other incentives. So I think it is, again, helping drive economic development and activity here in the United States. And the purpose of that provision was to align with some of those federal standards.
And my second question is on the historically underserved community for the 20% for schools. I just wondered how that is being determined. I know that there's an NRS for that term, but our school zoning lines don't always line up perfectly historically underserved. So are we looking at Title I as a shortcut or free and reduced lunch, or what are you looking at for that measure?
Thank you for that question, Howard Watts for the record. So the goal is to make sure that that, for example, with school buses, that they are being deployed. So, for example, Clark County or Washoe County School District, based on this definition that exists in statute, I think there are already some maps out there, and we can work to get some follow-up information, both with the definition and some of the areas that qualify in the state. Clark County or Washoe County School District is definitely going to have multiple areas that would qualify as historically underserved communities. The goal is to get the buses in those communities, and I know that some of this language kind of says the district at the district level. We want to make sure that it's going to the places that will benefit, in my opinion, from them the most. So we'd definitely be open to some additional conversations on how we can achieve that goal. But again, the goal is that, particularly in those larger districts, we don't want them to, just because the district includes some, then deploy the vehicles in other areas. So the goal is, at least not with the multiplier and the special consideration. So the goal is deploy it in these communities that need it, and then you can qualify for some of the bonuses related to that.
And I appreciate that sentiment, and I agree with that sentiment. I think I would love to chat offline just on the details, because I think in our school districts, they buy buses as a whole district, and then the buses are used in multiple places on multiple routes. And so they may be going to a historically underserved community in the morning and then somewhere else in the afternoon, or even changing throughout the year. And so I think if we can just figure out how we can actually nail down that language with the way that the districts actually work, that would be great.
Thank you, Howard Watts, for the record. I will be glad to continue conversations with you and with school district representatives offline about that. I will say that recently Clark County School District got the highest possible award from the EPA to procure electric school buses, and I think did have some specific schools and areas that they plan to deploy those buses in, and have some associated charging infrastructure. But glad to follow up with you.
Assemblymember DeLong.
Thank you, Chair. I originally did have two questions, but the Assemblywoman asked one of them as it relates to subsection GI. So I'll ask about section 18 in general. It's contemplating what looks like a fair amount of activity for NDEP, Bureau of Air Pollution Control, or Air Quality Planning. And with your conceptual amendment, sounds like you're adding some compliance requirements to that agency also. And I know NDP's in attendance, they might answer this, but I thought I'd ask you anyway. What about staffing? This appears to create at least one or two positions, and so I didn't see anything in the bill about that.
Thank you very much for that question, Assemblyman. Howard Watts for the record. It's a great question. I don't want to speak too much for the agency. I'm sure they'll come up at some point and they can potentially add some additional context. What I'll say is that the goal of the program is that some of these funds can be used for administration. So the goal is that some of that one can be used to stand up and administer the program. So when we talked about some of those big picture numbers, some of that would be used for administration before, and then the remainder would go towards the grants. So in short, I don't think the capacity is necessarily there right now. It's envisioned that the resources we talked about would be used to help bolster that capacity. And then the final thing that I will add is that, again, through some of their diesel emission reduction programs, they do have capacity, they do have experience administering similar programs, so I think that will be beneficial, and potentially some of the further streamlining can really help, of the language can really help align that with some of their existing programs and expertise.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Assemblymember Hanson.
Good afternoon. It's good to see all of you here. A couple of questions. You mentioned hydrogen fuel cell would qualify. I know that there are some, does natural gas vehicles, is that, I mean, that's considered a clean fuel, but it's a fossil fuel? So, and then I have another question.
Thank you for that question, Assemblywoman. Howard Watts for the record. Those would not qualify because they do still have emissions, so they do not qualify as zero emissions vehicles.
And just to clarify, did you say hydrogen fuel cell would qualify?
Howard Watts for the record, that is correct.
Okay, great, thank you. And then in your amendment, section 20, you say, well, the original language said to receive an incentive for the purchase of an eligible clean truck. This is really a compliance issue. Agree to operate the clean truck or bus for at least, now you're saying 3 years. You alluded to regulation. We'll have to deal with some of these specifics. But in order for me to get comfort with the bill, how is this compliance? How do they prove? How do they know they use the truck or bus for 3 years? Is the owner or the entity that has the vehicle going to have to do some sort of reporting annually, quarterly? Just what would that look like?
Thank you for that question, Howard Watts for the record. I will turn it over to some of my colleagues to talk a little bit more about what's envisioned in terms of the reporting timeline. We're trying to make this minimally burdensome for folks, but for example, having it domiciled, proving that it's been registered in the state. So getting that registered after the purchase has been completed and providing that. I don't want to speak too much for the division because, again, some of these can be figured out in a rulemaking process with stakeholder feedback on the best way to accomplish this. But, it could be anything from an affidavit, some sort of logs, et cetera. So I think there's a variety of ways, and those would really be fleshed out in a deeper conversation with those who would be eligible to take advantage of the program.
Assemblymember Considine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'm a little confused about the voucher process, so I was hoping you could go over it a little bit more. For example, it seems like it would be pretty clear, like an independent truck operator would apply. But then on section 19, I think where I'm getting a little confused. Section 3, it says an approved contractor. Section B, submit an application for a voucher on behalf of an eligible entity. But then section subsection C says redeem a voucher after selling. So I think I'm just confused about how those work and if they're different, if they're a contractor or somebody's getting something direct.
Thank you for that question. Howard Watts for the record. And again, my colleagues can jump in here if I oversimplify it to the point of getting it wrong. But basically, these are larger, in general, more sophisticated entities, even small businesses. So the idea is the program is out there. Somebody who's eligible, when they're looking at a vehicle, is going to be talking with whoever's planning to make that sale, a dealer or a manufacturer. And there's going to be a conversation, hey, you're eligible to apply for this program. That also might help them close the deal, right? They'd work together to compile all the necessary information. And the goal of this is that it's applied cash on the hood at the point of sale. It's not a rebate that someone has to put up the capital for and then wait for some period of time to recoup. So the potential purchaser and the seller work to put in that application. Again, they wait for that to be vetted by the division, and once that is approved, then they can complete the sale, and then the goal is to try and get that transaction completed ASAP, and then the division would transfer the appropriate incentive amount to the seller. Did I get that about right?
Yeah, I think you did. I would just say the contractor is ultimately the seller of the vehicle, and then there's a purchaser of the vehicle that's sometimes called the eligible entity. So there's two separate entities. There's where the business that's selling the truck, and then there's the ultimate purchaser that's going to be using and operating the truck. So those are two separate sort of categories of entities in this bill. Aaron Kressig, for the record.
Okay, so just that I have this correct in my mind, one question is, in other states when this is happening, what is the turnaround time for that? And then the second question, just to clarify, is if the purchaser is purchasing this truck and they have applied, and the difference between what the voucher amount is and what it would normally cost if it was not a zero emissions vehicle is what the buyer is actually paying. They're paying that difference, right?
Howard Watts for the record. So in terms of the process in other states, we can follow up with you to get some of that information. But in terms of the process, again, it took me a while to wrap my head around this because this is different than the vehicle purchases that we normally do as individuals. These are high dollar purchases that are often planned out in advance. It's not someone comes in kind of on a whim, takes a test drive and completes a sale. And so that's why this process kind of envisions as part of that ongoing conversation, negotiation. Sometimes it takes a while. These vehicles have to be commissioned and constructed and delivered. And so as that process is going on, there can be a process of applying for this voucher, and that applies and reduces the upfront cost that the buyer would pay. And then just to make sure that's clear, and yeah, the floor would be what it would cost to get a comparable internal combustion engine vehicle. So it would not go below that.
Assemblymember Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing forward such an in-depth language for this. My question has to do with the amendment, in particular, the proposed amendment number 5. And I believe you said this, I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly, that the penalties would actually be done at the department level and the regulatory language, which would then be approved by the Ledge Commission, I believe, but I just want to make sure that I understood that correctly.
Thank you very much for that question. Howard Watts for the record. That's correct. And again, it's one of those things, as we've had these conversations, I think we're probably going to do some additional streamlining of the language so that it's even clearer and easier to understand, and then allow some of these details to really be fleshed out by the division in a way that makes the most sense for them to administer the program. And this would be one of those things. Instead of trying to prescribe exact penalties in the statute, let the division figure all that out. And again, understanding that to Assemblywoman Hansen's question as well, maybe there's a miscommunication. So the whole goal is to have a process that has a lot of stakeholders to figure out what's the appropriate way to verify kind of these requirements that we're asking from the purchaser. And then, you know, also that there's appropriate process to try and fix any issue up front. But then if somebody is really intentionally trying to game the system and not follow the layout that's in here, that there is some form of penalty and teeth to that to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Assemblymember Hansen has another question.
Thank you, Chair, for another bite at the apple. Not in the bill, but just a general question. I'm not sure the expertise for you to be able to answer this, but to put it out there. So as we look at a transition from combustible engine to electric vehicles, vehicles are only as good as the support system to repair them. I think we all know how that is, to find a good mechanic. So we're seeing a total change now in technology and repair. So how robust is that? I mean, we're seeing this gradual transition. Do we have the workforce to support these vehicles that are going to be incentivized because of money? Are we going to get ahead of the curve and then have vehicles? Now, granted, they'll be new, but when there's problems with them, I'm just curious what that workforce even looks for to support these vehicles on repair.
Thank you very much for that question. Howard Watts for the record. You know, again, I think that for so many, whether it's folks doing regular vehicle maintenance, but also, you know, in some cases when we talk about some of the support network with charging, electrical contractors, I think there is a strong labor force out there and continual development of programs to educate and improve the credentials of mechanics, of electricians and contractors to do this work. You know, I'm sure there probably is something that we could continue to do to help bolster the kind of EV maintenance workforce and work with some of our institutions of higher education. I don't think that's contemplated in this bill, but I would be glad to continue those conversations and make sure that as part, I think that just goes back to a higher level conversation as we look at some of our economic development and diversification strategies. Workforce really is critical to that, and so I think we do want to make sure that that is incorporated into the overall vision as well.
Okay, I have a couple questions. Let me get back to the presentation. Okay, so I understand about the 35% that were allocated for the CRP funding that can be used in any manner we see fit if we meet the objectives. And I understand that the trucks and these vehicles are a really good bang for our buck if we're gonna concentrate on those, and that these other states have also done that because it is such a good bang for our buck. But have there been other states that have done something else? And if so, what have they done with the 35%?
Thank you for that question, Howard Watts for the record. That's something that we will, and probably the Department of Transportation will have to get some additional information on. Again, you know, with the recent passage of these laws, so CRP funding is actually already coming to the state. The department is engaged in a plan to figure out how to distribute those. 65% of those funds have to be allocated on a kind of population-based formula. That has traditionally been done by basically moving those funds to the relevant metropolitan planning organization, which here is basically the RTCs. So this doesn't envision touching that. As far as what states are doing with the other 35%, those plans are not required to be sent to the federal government for a while, so there's still a lot of information that we frankly don't have. There's, I think, envisioned a process of evaluating different options to see what the impact is. I don't know if alternative fuels have been contemplated under this or under what was referenced, the existing federal air quality, which is focused on those criteria, those health impacting air pollutants. This is very similar but focused on carbon reduction. So I don't know if there's been an analysis of, to your point, the bang for the buck of this compared with other potential uses of the funds. I personally believe that it's quite significant and that studying it would bear out that this is a strong use of the funds.
Thank you, Assembly Member. And then you touched on this, but I just want to go back to this and double check on Section 17. When we're talking about the businesses being domiciled in the state, we're talking about the legal definition of domiciled, so that the business actually has to be incorporated in the state. So we're only helping these Nevada businesses.
Thank you for that question. Howard Watts for the record. Yes, we want folks to be here. We want the vehicles to be registered here. And again, so while we are kind of making an investment with these federal funds, I mean, these are transactions that generate sales tax. They generate registration. So we want those benefits to accrue here, and we want air pollution reduction to accrue here, and that's what the purpose of those requirements is.
Thank you. And I have a question from Assemblymember Gurr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is it my understanding that this whole program is based on federal funds?
Howard Watts for the record, that is correct.
Follow up? How long is that program designed forever, or do we end up picking it up at the state level when that expires, if it expires?
Howard Watts for the record. Thank you for that question. So it was, I think, authorized for 5 federal fiscal years. By the time we get this all set up, I think the plan is to harness funds for 3 of those fiscal years. I think it's our sincere hope that the federal government would continue the program in some shape or form after that. Again, we could seek or choose to allocate some additional funding towards this program. Otherwise, it would essentially ramp down. We've seen, for example, NDEP has done these programs using Diesel Emission Reduction Act funds for quite some time. They were able to significantly step up and expand the scope of those when the Volkswagen settlement funds came in, but those have essentially kind of come in and flowed out. And so there's a similar vision for this program. It would not leave the state on the hook to fund this at a certain level using state funds, for example, moving forward.
Thank you for that answer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, if you're ready, we will move on to support. And I will just remind folks, we are going to be timing to make sure that we can get everyone in, so it will be 2 minutes. Please fill in the chairs as other supporters exit them. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Coe, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Paul Enos. I'm the CEO of the Nevada Trucking Association, and we're here today to support Assembly Bill 184, which really is one piece of the puzzle. Most of my members are small businesses. Average trucking company is about 6 trucks, and we can't afford to get this stuff wrong. So in order for us to adopt these zero-emission vehicles, we do need these incentives, because deploying those vehicles comes at a cost. You have a higher purchase price, $500,000 for some of these electric or hydrogen vehicles. And that's with the tax bill. And here in Nevada, of about 25%. So you're looking at $125,000 that go to state, federal taxes on that vehicle. There's an unknown residual value of these trucks. There's operational challenges because of the additional weight. There's less efficient than some of the conventional internal combustion engines that we have. So you may have to purchase more trucks and able to move that same amount of freight that you move with an internal combustion engine. The training, that was a great question about the training. We have a diesel tech shortage right now that's probably worse than the truck driver shortage. So that is a challenge. But it's interesting because these trucks tend to be easier to maintain. They have fewer moving parts. It's not an engine. The motors are actually on the wheels, on the axle. So you may have to replace your tires a little more frequently. There was a question about that made in America. Most trucks are made in America today. So, Denton, Texas, or Oregon, or Florida. So we do have these trucks actually being made here. We appreciate streamlining this process, putting some of those issues with NDEP where we can, try to make sure that if somebody decides, hey, we want to build these in Canada or we want to build these in Mexico, that they could still take advantage of those. In terms of how do you audit, what is that mechanism? We have the ability through the International Registration Plan, through the International Fuel Tax Agreements, which are collected by the DMV, to see where these trucks are going. These are things that are either
Minutes,
filed
if you
on an
can
annual or quarterly basis.
wrap up, please.
And just to answer your question, Chair, there are other states that do this and do this well. In California, you can get anywhere from $20,000 to $410,000 for an electric vehicle. New Jersey, New York. So there are other states where this kind of program is working. Thank you.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Hi, for the record, my name is Sandra Koch. I'm a OBGYN and live in Carson City. I'm here representing Nevada Clinicians for Climate and Health, and I'm here to substantiate the fact that we know the negative health impacts of smog and microparticles. And I just think in this situation, it's important for us to emphasize the fact that we know these pollutants increase the rates of asthma in children. They exacerbate asthma, they increase ER visits, they increase the risk of heart attacks, preterm birth. Tragically, they also increase the risk of childhood leukemia and breast cancer. I can go on and just say that's the same thing is true for childhood leukemia and breast cancer, heart disease, cognitive impairment, dementia, impulse control, poor academic performance. It's estimated that 100,000 people per year die from exposure to these pollutants. The people most affected by these are those who live and work exposed to the smog. No one would choose to live in these areas, but some people don't get that choice. When you track pollutants over time, it's very clear that the highest levels are clustered around airports and freeways. So we are being offered the opportunity to use federal funds to create an incentive program that will help us transition away from combustible fuel sources, and we are here to encourage you to vote yes on this bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, Michael Hillerby on behalf of Republic Services. We're pleased to be here today to support AB 184. Republic has made the first and by far largest commitment to fleet electrification in our industry. With more than 17,000 trucks, which represents the nation's fifth largest vocational fleet, Republic's commitment to fleet electrification will deliver meaningful environmental, safety, and economic benefits in the communities we serve. We are already operating electric collection trucks in 2 states, and we have plans for future deployments to include exploring options in southern Nevada. Given the importance of our climate and sustainability goals, we support the efforts of AB 184. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Andrew McKay. I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Franchise Auto Dealers Association. In short, we sell the trucks that Paul's guys drive. Many of you heard me say this in one-on-one conversations. The largest impediment in getting individuals, in this case, small businesses and companies, into cleaner, more fuel-efficient vehicles is price, period, end of story. One of the things that Mr. Enos alluded to is when you just look in terms of the cost from a tax standpoint on the front of that vehicle, whatever it is oftentimes cost prohibitive. And this is, with no doubt, a solution to that problem. To address a couple of the questions and concerns, Assemblywoman Hanson, when you talked about or asked about a auto tech shortage, yeah, it's a real problem. And in fact, I testified yesterday on Senate Bill 144 that's going to somewhat address this from vocational schools. And just in the United States, we need 76,000 techs every year just to keep up with retirements and new jobs in the industry. Now, when you look in terms of what is that in Nevada, and diesel techs are a lot higher with respect to that. These are jobs that this is going to generate. Average auto tech in Nevada makes just about $71,000 a year. Diesel techs are over $100,000 a year. So there's no doubt this is going to generate jobs. Assemblywoman Considine, really appreciated you talking about cash on the hood. I want to thank Assemblyman Watts for meeting with us and talking about it. The only way the incentives are going to work is it's got to be a cash on the hood. It needs to be as simple as possible, and I think we're going to true that up in the regulatory process. Additionally, want to thank him for addressing a concern of ours, and that is for the person that receives the voucher, that that entity or that individual follows the four corners of the law. We were concerned that if that individual falsifies the information and we're a party for submitting it, that we would be on the hook.
2 minutes if you can.
So I'm done. Encourage your support. Thank you so much.
Please go ahead.
Dear Chair Cohen and members of the committee, thank you for letting us speak today. My name is Rose Walterbeek, and I'm a volunteer member of Sierra Club's Toyobe Chapter Legislative Committee. I speak on behalf of over 30,000 Sierra Club members and supporters who live in the state of Nevada. So we support AB 184 because of the state incentive for the purchase of these zero-emission vehicles. We support the legislation because we recognize that immediate and rapid reduction in fossil fuel consumption should be a priority for all of our collective efforts. The transportation sector, as we know, is a major contributor to poor air quality, and technology exists to eliminate the emissions. So in particular, trucks and buses, those emissions were high, as we heard today from our subject matter experts, and that's the time they spend idling and traveling in that intermittent, that stop-and-go traffic. So the legislation is particularly appealing because of the rebate process and that it's coming from the federal government and grant sources. So the actual cost should be limited to administrative by the state of Nevada. So again, echoing that we are looking at, it would be upgrades that we need at a bargain cost to the state. We are in the process, as you most know, of improving the electrical charging infrastructure, and we've made great steps. And with the amendments that was brought up by Mr. Watts, it's going to be going primarily to Nevada residents. So again, we're going to see these changes, and it shouldn't be an excessive burden for the operators with the charging stations, and it sounds like there is some discussion already with the support for the vehicle maintenance. So it's time to take every step possible to mitigate, and we support that we're using all the pathways to do this without creating further degradation to our pristine lands. It's a really good first step to eliminate fossil fuel, and thank you so much for your time.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Dylan Keith, Assistant Director of Government Affairs at the Vegas Chamber. As my industry colleagues were saying before, the largest cost barrier is moving over any of your fleet, even if it's to another combustible engine. Switching over to a new industry and an innovative technology comes with even more risks. And I'd like to thank the sponsor for bringing this bill forward, because this is really working to mitigate a lot of the risks that could come forward. We'd also like to appreciate the sponsor for supporting this emerging technology. It will create jobs, creating economic development in our region and our state, and we'd urge your support on this measure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, other Dylan Shaver, here today on behalf of the Washoe County School District in support of Assembly Bill 184. I want to echo what everybody else said, thanking the sponsor for bringing the measure. Just as an FYI to the committee, Washoe County School District right now is operating a pilot program for electric school buses. We own two. They are stored off the Geiger Grade store transportation facility. We have an RFP out to put a charging station out there, and ideally that facility will hold 10 more. The main facility will hold about 30. But first, what we need to do is, examine these for a little bit longer to ensure that we can do this program within the resources taxpayers give us. We can do it on time within the current logistics operation, and most importantly, that we can do it and get everybody's kids safely to school. We appreciate a program like this because it allows us to continue this exploration, to make sure it is the absolute right thing for these students and their families. And we can, with incentives like this, every penny we can spend from the government is a penny that we don't have to, that we can keep in the classrooms and focusing on core missions. So in closure, we hope you support this measure, and thank you for the opportunity today.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tom Clark. I'm here on behalf of the Reno Sparks Chamber of Commerce. We appreciate the sponsor bringing forward this bill, and we very much support AB 184. Thank you.
Good evening, Patricia Haddad, Director of Government Relations for the Clark County School District. We'll keep it short and sweet for you. We absolutely appreciate the bill sponsor for bringing this legislation forward, and we think it's a great opportunity as it provides the district more opportunities to continue to explore how we might transition our bus and our vehicle fleet, and then also appreciated the amendment around the increased multipliers, or the increased opportunity to be able to activate those multipliers. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera-Georgeson, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Nevada Conservation League. We submitted a letter on Nellis, so we'll keep it nice and short. We think this is a win-win for the state. It helps economic opportunities by lowering operational costs, and it promotes healthier communities by lowering air pollution. We'd like to thank the bill sponsor for bringing it forward, and we urge the committee's support. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair Cohen and members of the committee. For the record, Chelsea Capurro here on behalf of the Urban Chamber. We want to thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing forward this bill. We love that one of the goals is to provide support for small business owners and are happy to be here in support.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Katie Ryan, and I'm with Dignity Health St. Rose Dominican in support today of AB 184. At St. Rose, we believe contributing to our healthy environment and collective quality of life continues to be a key measure of our organization's success. With over 30% of Nevada's greenhouse gas emissions coming from the transportation sector, and that number is expected to grow, accelerating the adoption of EVs is critical to preventing the worst impacts of climate change and air pollution. Addressing the medium and heavy-duty sector in particular is critical given its outsized role in harmful emissions that cause asthma, cardiovascular disease, and premature death. This program is an important step to increase access and consumer choices in transportation, spur innovation, and invest in the integration of clean energy resources that will have an enormous public health benefit, notably over $5 billion by 2040. This is why we've joined a letter as part of a written testimony signed by more than 12 businesses in the state supporting AB 184. Thank you.
Madam Chair, sorry, for the record, Chelsea Capurro just got notification from another client. We represent Opportunity 180 as well, and they're in support. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. For the record, David Cherry with the City of Henderson. The city maintains a large fleet of medium-duty vehicles to service our various departments, including sweepers, dump trucks, factor trucks, and bucket trucks, among others. And the city supports the goals of the program, including the use of incentives to encourage the purchase of these zero-emission vehicles to further reduce air pollution, including the particulates that contribute to health issues like asthma. We have a few questions about how compliance with the program will be monitored, but we are hopeful that once DPS sets out the rules for the program, those will become clear. And thank you to the sponsor for bringing this.
Anyone else in Carson City? Okay, seeing none. I don't think we have anyone in Las Vegas in support or in Elko. So, do we have anyone in Las Vegas in support? Okay. Seeing none, BPS, if we can go to the phones.
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 184, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen, Vice Chair Anderson, and members of the committee. My name is Gabriela Olmedo. I'm an associate at Advanced Energy United, a clean energy business association working to make the energy we use clean, affordable, and reliable. We represent over 100 companies across the energy spectrum, as well as large-scale renewables, transmission, solar storage, as well as electric vehicle manufacturers, operators and fleets, and charging developers. I'm speaking on behalf of our association to express business support for the Nevada Clean Trucks and Buses Incentive Program. This program would enable Nevada to take advantage of federal dollars to lower the upfront cost barrier for the adoption of medium and heavy-duty electric vehicles by Nevada businesses and public entities. As we've heard, businesses want access to these vehicles, which offer considerable operational, maintenance, and fuel savings over their lifetimes. The purchasing of clean fleets will also drive additional private investment into the electric vehicle charging industry, bringing more clean into the state of Nevada. The Clean Trucks and Buses Incentive Program will make best use of the unprecedented federal funding moment before us by kickstarting Nevada's new and promising clean truck market and driving economic development and diversification into a growth industry. Nevada is incredibly well positioned to become an electric vehicle hub, from its lithium resources to its positive economic climate for manufacturing to its focus on battery recycling and the creation of a circular economy. And this bill will demonstrate Nevada's commitment to that industry in a big way. We've submitted a business sign-on letter expressing support from a wide range of business voices in the space. Thank you to the bill sponsor for bringing this bill forward. And we urge you to support this program and drive Nevadan businesses and fleets forward into a modern, high-performing, lower-cost clean energy future. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. And to the person in Las Vegas, I'm not sure if you're in support, but we're going to keep going with the phones, and then we'll come back and just check with you in case you are in support. So with that, BPS, if we can go back to the phones.
Caller, you are unmuted and may begin.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Dave Roba, and I'm representing Ceres to express our support for AB 184. Ceres is a national nonprofit that advances leadership among investors, companies, and capital market influencers to take action on the world's most pressing sustainability issues. Our policy network, Businesses for Innovative Climate and Energy Policy, or BICEP, includes more than 80 companies with dozens of leading consumer brands and Fortune 500s, many of which have operations or business interests here in Nevada. For the companies we partner with, transportation is both a major cost center in business operations and a leading driver of carbon emissions and air pollution. A growing number of zero-emission, medium and heavy-duty vehicles offer significant savings over their economic lifetimes through lower fuel and maintenance costs, while also reducing risks posed by volatile fossil fuel prices and supply. Although transitioning to zero-emission vehicles offers long-term savings and public health benefits, commercial electrification still faces challenges, including higher upfront vehicle costs. Incentive programs like the one set forth in AB 184 will help drivers and fleets looking to transition to electric trucks and buses to unlock the savings and health benefits of zero-emission vehicles. This is why we joined written testimony signed by more than 12 businesses, some of which you've heard from today. And in addition to the economy and in addition to stimulating the economy and creating local jobs, we see that these incentives are even more valuable now, as one, we expect continuing progress towards cost parity for these vehicles, and two, this program could position the state to secure and leverage further federal dollars. Thank you all for your consideration for this bill and the opportunity to provide comments today.
Thank you, BPS. Next person on the phone.
Hi, my name is Brian Rodd. Good afternoon. I'm the Director of Government Relations with Lion Electric.
We were founded 15 years ago. We are recognized as a leading OEM of all electric U.S.-made medium and heavy-duty vehicles and zero-emission school buses. We rise in support of AB 184. This bill is critical to making it possible for local businesses, school districts, municipalities, and public transit agencies to take advantage of funding that would immediately lower the upfront cost of transitioning to medium and heavy-duty EVs. Businesses and organizations would benefit tremendously. Operational and maintenance costs would decrease, and they would see fuel savings. Lion's customers and partners say that the savings between electric vehicles and diesel-powered ones is very clear. About 80% in energy cost reduction and 60% in maintenance cost decrease when organizations transition to these all-electric medium and heavy-duty vehicles. The Department of Energy projects that zero-emission medium and heavy-duty vehicle trucks will be cheaper than diesel-powered trucks by 2035. The findings of the report suggest that cost competitiveness of zero-emission medium and heavy-duty vehicles can be largely achieved by this 2035 date, and specifically the report finds that the cost of zero-emission EV medium heavy-duty vehicles will be the same, lower, or equal to that of diesel trucks. Again, I'd like to thank giving Lion an opportunity to address these important and critical environmental concerns and rise in support of AB 184. Thank you.
BPS, next caller, please.
Caller, you are unmuted and may begin. Caller, you are unmuted on our side, but it sounds like you may be muted on your phone.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Sorry. Chair Cohen, Vice Chair Anderson, and honorable members of the committee, my name is Will Dreyer. I'm a policy manager speaking on behalf of the Electrification Coalition in support of AB 184. The EC is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that, alongside our sister organization, SAFE, partners with the Energy Security Leadership Council, which is made up of 4-star admirals and generals and business leaders, to promote the policies and actions needed to facilitate the widespread adoption of electric vehicles, all in an effort to combat our nation's transportation dependence on oil and to maintain U.S. leadership and competitiveness across the automotive supply chain for economic security. Oil accounts for about 90% of the energy use in the transportation in the United States. Every year, the U.S. taxpayer pays or spends roughly $81 billion for the U.S. military to safeguard the global oil supply and trade. And furthermore, our reliance and exposure to the global oil market is a detriment to our national and economic security, a market that's controlled and manipulated by a cartel of countries with the world's largest and cheapest oil reserves that share neither our interests nor our values. We have long seen that EVs and the domestic EV industry as the most promising solution to break oil's monopoly over our transportation system. And as the world shifts to EVs, China's dominance of the entire EV supply chain makes accelerating the adoption of EVs in the U.S. that much more urgent. As has been made clear, reducing the cost barrier to EVs is one of the most effective and powerful policy levers to accelerate EV adoption. Rapid adoption of electric vehicles will also be a boon for Nevada's economy, which stands to benefit from its EV industry leadership, as increasing demands for EVs, batteries, and inputs across the entire supply chain will be beneficial for companies already within the state and those that may come. For these reasons, we're in support of AB 184. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comment today.
Thank you, BPS. Next person on the phone, please.
Caller, please press *6 to unmute. If you have recently joined the call and would like to provide testimony in support of Assembly Bill 184, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have one caller that wished to provide testimony, but they're unable to unmute at this time.
Thank you, BPS. If we'll keep going with the person in Las Vegas, and if that person on the phone can try to call back in, we'll accommodate them if possible. And was that the last person on the phone in support?
Yes, Chair.
Okay. All
There
right,
are no
thank
more
you.
callers to testify in support.
Okay, so with that, if the person in Las Vegas is in support, if you'll go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman and committee members. My name is Melissa Ramos. I'm the Senior Manager of Clean Air Advocacy with the American Lung Association. The American Lung Association advocates for policies that reduce air pollution and protect human health. Assembly Bill 184 is critical to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and reduce the health risks associated with emissions from medium and heavy-duty vehicles like buses, delivery vans, and trucks. Currently, medium and heavy-duty vehicles make up about 6% of total on-road vehicles but generate the heaviest doses of pollution. AB 184 will reduce these unhealthy truck emissions and clean our air by accelerating the adoption of zero-emission medium heavy-duty vehicles. The pollutants from diesel exhaust are dangerous to human health, and AB 184 safeguards Nevadans from these health risks. The pollutants in diesel exhaust harm lung and heart health, causing heart attacks, strokes, increased asthma attacks, and premature death. These health risks are heightened even more for our most vulnerable populations, including low-income, communities of color, children, and seniors. The American Lung Association's Delivering Clean Air report demonstrates cleaning up medium heavy-duty vehicles and investing in non-combustion energy could yield up to $5.2 billion in public health benefits in Nevada over the coming decades. This legislation is critical to protect Nevadans from breathing in unhealthy, polluted air, especially for those living near major truck traffic where pollution burdens are more concentrated. As there is a growing number of a strong health coalition, we urge you to vote in favor of AB 184 to create the Nevada Clean Truck Incentive Program, which will have a positive impact to our climate, air quality, and our health. Thank you.
Thank you. So, BPS, was the person on the phone able to get back in?
Let me try one more time, Chair.
Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 711, please press *6 to unmute.
Hello, Chair Cohen and members of the committee. My name is Jane Amon, and I'm the External Affairs Director for the Nature Conservancy in Nevada. We are here to testify in support of AB 184. The Nature Conservancy is committed to tackling climate change, which is one of the biggest threats to our mission to conserve the lands and waters on which all life depends. We support policies that will help Nevada reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We appreciate that this bill tackles the largest source of emissions in our state, transportation. We support incentives to help businesses and independent operators in the state invest in a climate-friendly option for their transportation needs. Additionally, there are abundant opportunities now to leverage federal funds for this purpose. Thank you for considering this bill and our support.
Thank you. And BPS, that was the last person in support?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. So with that, we will move to opposition in Carson City. Okay, seeing none. Opposition in Las Vegas. Seeing none. Opposition in Elko. Seeing none. Opposition on the phones.
To testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 184, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers wishing to testify.
Thank you. So with that, we will go to neutral in Carson City. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Alexis Motorex with the Nevada Chapter Associated General Contractors, representing 300 members in and around the commercial construction industries in northern Nevada. AGC is neutral on AB 184. While we appreciate efforts to reduce carbon emissions and to take advantage of the federal funding, we can't support any measure incentivizing the purchase of electric vehicles until action is taken to address sustainable highway funding. While the purchase of these vehicles will generate registration revenue and sales tax revenue, it will not generate fuel tax revenue. We can't continue to build and maintain Nevada roadways on which all cars and trucks drive without addressing the growing shortfall of the highway fund. We look forward to continuing our conversations with the sponsor to achieve his goals while finding an equitable and sustainable funding solution for our roadways.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Chair Cohen, members of the committee. I'm Jeffrey Kinder, Deputy Administrator with the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. Joining me tonight is Dr. Danilo Dragoni, Chief of our Bureau of Air Quality Planning. As noted in the introduction, we do currently implement 2 mobile source programs in our air program, the first being EPA's Diesel Emission Reduction Program, or Diesel Emission Reduction Act, or the DERA program. We've been a very active participant in that program since 2008. We also do administer the VW settlement on behalf of the state of Nevada. I believe that began in 2017, 2018 as well. To Assemblyman DeLong's question, we are looking at the impacts on our program to implement this program, both the regulatory development part as well as the ongoing implementation and compliance requirements. We do understand from the bill language that we can cover our administrative costs through the federal program, but we're currently researching the federal program to understand how that works and what would be available to us. Lastly, I'll note, we've taken a lot of notes tonight on the very good discussion on implementation questions. And if asked to implement this program, we would look forward to a very robust engagement with our stakeholders to get regulations in place. With that, we're happy to answer any questions throughout this process. Thank you.
Thank you both for being here. Okay, do we have anyone else in neutral in Carson City? Seeing none. Anyone in Elko or Las Vegas? Seeing none, we'll go to the phones, please, BPS.
Testifying neutral to Assembly Bill 184, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers wishing to testify.
Thank you, BPS. Okay, and I'm getting a wave off from the bill sponsor. So with that, I will close out the hearing on Assembly Bill 184. And continuing Howard Watts Day, we will move on to Assembly Bill 84, which revises requirements for the issuance of certain annual permits for entering camping and boating in state parks and recreational areas. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Again, Howard Watts for the record, representing Assembly District 15 in Clark County. For better or worse, yes, I suppose this is Howard Watts Day. Unfortunately, might not be the only one. At any rate, I'm glad to present Assembly Bill 84 for your consideration today. This bill was recommended before I passed on the gavel for this committee to Chair Cohen. It was actually based on some requests that came forward to us during the interim, but didn't make the timeline and kind of the cutoff for our joint interim standing committee on natural resources process. Still, I thought it was a great concept and wanted to put it forward for this body's consideration. What the bill does is quite simple. It would provide the access to enter and utilize state park facilities at no charge for members of indigenous tribes located wholly or partly within the state of Nevada. I'm really going to keep the presentation brief so that you can hear from some of the supporters about why this is important to them, because that's really what led me to bring it forward. But essentially, I just want to recognize that we are all gathered today on the ancestral homeland of indigenous peoples, land that was never ceded by those peoples, but was occupied and taken. And the goal of this bill is to allow those people to access some of the truly special areas without there being barriers or burdens for them. In addition to a member of the Walker River Paiute tribe, the Native Voters Alliance of Nevada expressed interest in this. And then separately, I received communication from the Moapa Band of Paiutes, which I know many Southern Nevadans are familiar with, and the gateway to the Valley of Fire. And you go out to Valley of Fire and go to Mouse's Tank, and there are petroglyphs, and that is their ancestral homeland. And to me, to have them need to pay to visit that site or to camp or stay out there is not appropriate. That's why I brought forward the bill, and I'm glad to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you. So you're ready for questions? When we spoke, speaking of turning over the committee, when we spoke about this bill, that was my comment. I can't imagine that the people of Mouse's descendants can't go into Mouse's Tank. It's without having to pay. There are some exceptions, so I will kind of ask about that. So can you please tell us about the exceptions that are already in place for religious ceremonies?
Thank you for that question, Howard Watts for the record. Yes, there are some practices in place to allow Indigenous people to enter and utilize parks for traditional practices, medicine gathering, ceremonies, etc. I want to make sure that, again, there's no barrier for members of these tribes to access these areas. One other thing that I want to make clear really at the outset is that State Parks has done incredible work to increase accessibility to state parks and try and create greater equity in who's coming to the parks. They may come and speak to it. They're launching a fantastic program to allow people to check out park passes at libraries. A lot of great things that are expanding access to lower income communities and diverse communities. So I want to commend that work. But again, I just think that based on the sacrifices that that members of these tribes have made, that this is only appropriate.
Thank you. And we've heard about the park pass checkout, and it's been very successful, and it's been very popular and talked about a lot on social media for the last few weeks, if not months. And so that's been very exciting to see. But I do have a question for Assemblymember LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair. And truly thank you for bringing this, because I think we're on the same page. I think it's an essential bill and very long overdue. Along those lines, though, if we are talking about removing all barriers and ensuring there's no charge, I just want to confirm on page 2 when it talks about collecting an administrative fee. Can you just speak to what that is? Because if the administrative fee is $100, then this is not free of charge or low barriers. And so can you just tell us, do you know what the charge is, or is there a guarantee that it will be minimal?
Thank you very much for that question. Howard Watts for the record. So this bill actually provides that an administrative fee cannot be charged to these tribal members. Essentially, there have been discussions and policy to allow individuals, including veterans and disabled veterans, to access parks. As part of those conversations, the consideration was made to allow the state to recoup an administrative fee, basically just to cover a portion of their time to process those applications, to look at the paperwork and issue a park pass. That would be, by the way, what's envisioned with this is that a tribal member would provide their tribal ID. It would be looked at by a park employee, and then they would be given a park pass free of charge. So that's why you see references to those administrative fees. I don't know what they are. They're certainly less than what the cost of an annual park pass is. This proposal is to be 100% free of charge.
Assemblymember DeLong.
Thank you, Chair. I have to admit, my understanding of how the parks are operated is limited, so my question may be a bit out of ignorance, but so bear with me. You were talking about, as it relates to the traditional cultural properties that exist on state parks, and there's provisions for tribal members to access those. Do they have to pay to get in if they're accessing a traditional cultural property?
Thank you for that question. Howard Watts for the record. My understanding is under current Division of State Parks practice, no, they do not. But again, there has to be some additional justification that they are visiting a specific cultural site. For example, an area with petroglyphs, or an area where they practice a particular ceremony, or are going to gather medicine. Again, given the history, my belief is that we should expand upon that and make sure that for any time or any reason that they want to visit these places, they're able to do so.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Committee, do we have any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to support in Carson City. And please come forward and fill in the chairs.
Good afternoon, Chair Cohen and members of the committee. My name is Rose Walterbeek, a volunteer member of the Sierra Club's Legislative Committee. On behalf of the Sierra Club Toyabe chapter and our more than 30,000 members and supporters statewide, I'm speaking in support of AB 84. With the successful passage of AB 95 in 2021, which added a tribal representative to the Legislative Committee on Public Lands, which our Toyabe chapter of the Sierra Club fully supported, it makes sense to allow any member of an Indian tribe a permit free of charge to enter, camp, and boat in all state parks and recreation areas. Nevada's indigenous communities have been living on and stewarding our lands for generations. In order to support access, AB 84 would eliminate a fee barrier with the passage of this bill to ensure that integral discussions about the management, protection, and use of those lands could continue, as all members would have access to the state parks and recreation areas in Nevada. Currently, Nevada residents who are 65 years of age or older and individuals who have incurred a permanent service-connected disability and vets who are honorably discharged from the armed forces receive permits free of charge, as you may know. Your support of AB 84 would demonstrate a small but important step for tribal members to also fully access Nevada state parks and recreation areas. I urge you in support of this bill as proposed. Again, I thank you in advance for your time.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Annette Magnus, Executive Director of Battleborn Progress. We are in unwavering support of AB 84, and we thank Assemblyman Watts for championing this critical measure. Regardless of where you are or where you call home in Nevada, you are on native land. AB 84 grants tribal nations that are located in our Silver State free annual passes to enter, camp, boat in state parks that are located on native lands. This bill is a great first step in not only respecting tribal sovereignty, but also honoring the stewards and caretakers of our beautiful state. Currently, our indigenous siblings are able to enter national parks with their tribal IDs, and we hope that the Silver State will make this necessary step to honor these individuals at state parks as well. Plainly, this is their land, and they should not have to pay to access it. We urge the committee to support AB 84. Thank you.
Hello, Will Adler with Silver State Government Relations, representing the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe. I don't want to belabor these points too long here because it's a long day, but I would like to ditto most of the comments we heard just now, but also I would like to just state, Nevada takes these opportunities to show the how we value those in our state and how we, identify those who, we hold in a higher regard. Today, veterans already have access to state parks free of charge completely for a lot of these same reasons, but we hold them in a high regard already, and a lot of people already, notify that and know that. But Native American tribes are the first people here, and those who I hold in the highest regard in my heart. So I do appreciate Assemblyman Watts for bringing forward AB 84, because it will give access to those who I feel deserve it the most. And I thank you guys for hearing this bill today.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Christy Cabrera-Georgeson here on behalf of the Nevada Conservation League. Our state and national parks exist on traditional indigenous lands, and these areas are an important reminder of the history of Native Americans in our country and in our state. It's only right that as the original stewards of this land, they are granted access to these special places. We urge the committee's support. Thank you.
For the record, my name is Clifford Banuelos. I am the Tribal State Environmental Liaison with the Intertribal Council of Nevada, and I'm a member of the Tomoka Tribe of Western Shoshone. ITCN is a consortium composed of 28 federally recognized tribes in Nevada, and our board is made up of tribal leaders from each of those tribal nations, and we meet frequently, and we have good participation from our leaders. Today I speak on behalf of ITCN, and in no way am I or ITCN speaking for any of our respective member tribes. This is only a testimony for ITCN. ITCN supports AB 84 regarding specific language that states under section labeled the Legislative Council's Digest that this bill requires the division to issue free of charge an annual permit to enter, camp, and boat in all state parks and recreational areas in the state to any member of any Indian tribe located in whole or in part in the state. The bill also provides that the division is required to issue such an annual permit to a member of an Indian tribe without collecting an administrative fee. We support the intent of the bill to provide free usage of state park lands and recreation and to areas to members of our tribes. It is the right thing to do, given the history of how our people were forced off these rich lands, and that we consider these areas our homelands and areas of great power and home to medicines and many of our cousins you call the animals. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Lanahan, and I'm here on behalf of the Reno Sparks Indian Colony and the Las Vegas Paiute Tribe. I will keep this brief. We just wanted to thank the sponsor for bringing this bill forward, and we are in full support. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Stacy Montooth. It's Stacey, Montooth, Montooth, and I'm a citizen of the Walker River Paiute Nation. I'm here today as a private citizen. I want to thank Assemblyman Watts for his continued leadership. He's such a great ally and advocate for Indian country. I wanted to take my time today to remind or maybe share the traditional facts of our indigenous relatives. Prior to contact, the early 1800s, the Washos, the Shoshones, the Paiutes, we never stayed in one place. We were not homesteaders. We followed the food. We weren't migrants, but we had specific travel patterns. It is not an exaggeration to say that even in 2023, the Numa, the Nui, the Washishi, the Mojave, we believe it's all indigenous land. So I appreciated the chair, your succinct remarks that this does make sense. We really appreciate it and look forward to your support for this bill. Thank you.
Okay, do we have anyone else in support in Carson City? Seeing none. Anyone in Elko or Las Vegas? Seeing none. BPS, is there anyone on the phones?
Testify in support of Assembly Bill 84, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Chair Cohen and members of the committee, my name is Jana Moan, and I'm the External Affairs Director for the Nature Conservancy in Nevada. We are here to testify in support of AB 84. We appreciate and enjoy our state parks and recreation areas. We also recognize that these lands are the traditional territories of the Numu, Nuwu, Noe, and Washoe peoples. We feel it is important for tribes to maintain their traditional ecological knowledge of these places, and we support AB 84 because it improves access for tribal members to experience their cultural lifeways. Thank you for considering this bill, thank you for bringing it forward, and thank you for hearing our support.
Thank you, BPS. Next person on the phones.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christine Saunders. That's CHRISTINESAUNDERS, and I'm the Policy Director with the Progressive Leadership Alliance Nevada. I'll just echo the sentiments of all the previous speakers and urge your support of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, BPS. Next person on the phone.
Good afternoon, Chair and Committee, or I guess we're moving into evening now. My name is Taylor Patterson. I'm the Executive Director of Native Voters Alliance Nevada. As previously mentioned, Indigenous people have been the traditional stewards of what is now known as Nevada since time immemorial. With settlers came our people being pushed into smaller and smaller spaces, often disconnected from our most sacred areas. Nearly all of our state parks are sacred to the 28 federally recognized tribes of Nevada. We need AB 84 to help tribal members access the spaces many generations before them called home. After generations of being forcibly removed from our lands and traditions, we are finally beginning to repair the damage that has been done. Currently, as mentioned earlier, those with tribal ID can access national parks for free. The National Park Service has recognized the importance of allowing Indigenous people to access the spaces that are traditionally ours, and it is time for Nevada to do the same. And I just want to thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing this forward and all of my non-Native allies that have testified on this today. Thank you.
Thank you, BPS. Next person on the phone.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Warren Graham, W-A-R-R-E-N, Graham, G-R-A-H-A-M, Chairman of the Duckwater Shoshone Tribe. The Duckwater Shoshone Tribe supports AB 84. The Duckwater Shoshone Tribe hopes this committee will strongly consider approving this bill. The idea of Native American tribes paying to visit our homelands is beyond unbelievable. It needs to be reconciled. As society moves forward, many groups, organizations, universities, etc., are starting to acknowledge the native peoples of these lands and the fact that we are the original caretakers and users of it. This bill would add to those continuing efforts to repair some of the wrongs done to the Native American people by, in a sense, removing the idea of pay to visit places where our ancestors lived and were removed when state parks were established. Nevada natives never ceded our lands. Through treaties, we allowed settlers to use our homelands to live, work, and commute. It is time for the state of Nevada to reciprocate the same ideology back to the Native American people. Thank you.
Thank you, BPS. Next person on the phones.
Caller with the last three digits, 346, please press *6 to unmute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Reverend Michael Willoughby, and I am speaking to you today from unceded Nuwu land. In addition to echoing the sentiment of my enrolled tribal brothers and sisters today, I would like to remind you that this is not just a policy issue, this is a morality issue. We cannot erase the bloody history of our country, our state, or this land, but we can take steps today to help rectify that and move forward positively. I encourage all of you to take this moment to act accordingly. Act on your conscience and do the right thing. I'd like to thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing this forward, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you, BPS. Next person on the phone, please.
Hello, my name is Teresa Melendez, and I'm with Silver State Government Relations. I'm calling in support on behalf of the Shoshone Paiute Tribes of the Duck Valley Indian Reservation. And I know it's been a long day. I want to acknowledge and thank Assemblyman Howard Watts for carrying this bill. And just as I said in a hearing yesterday, I was quoting Assemblyman LaRue Hatch, and this is one of those opportunities where the tribes has put in their requests, and really grateful that this assembly has recognized the request for for access to state parks and for those fees to be waived. So appreciative for this committee, and just calling in support of AB 84. Thank you much.
Thank you, BPS. Next person on the phones.
If you've recently joined the call and would like to testify in support of Assembly Bill 84, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller, you are unmuted and may begin.
Hi, my name is Brian Melendez. I'm a Northern Southern Paiute Western Shoshone and a CEO of Tribal Minds Incorporated. We're a native-led nonprofit of Nevada. But growing up in the Reno-Sparks area and throughout the city, it has never been more imperative for the tribal populations and the indigenous people here in the state of Nevada to have access to their traditional homelands in the areas where our people have historically gone to pray, gone to visit, sing, mourn, grieve, find healing and wellness for their life in their communities. And these areas that we're hoping to gain access to are vital to the health and mental health and wellness of the tribal communities. So I'm really asking for the time and consideration on this measure, and hope that the esteemed individuals in the building can understand what it means or could possibly mean for indigenous people to be able to access their land. I believe that this is a good measure. I believe that it is something that puts things into a forward-moving process where people can get access, and I hope that there will be enough support on this that we can get the access that we need for our communities. Thank you very much, and I support this 100%.
Thank you. Next person on the phones, please.
Chair, there are no more callers to provide testimony.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will go to opposition in Carson City. Okay, seeing none. Opposition in Las Vegas. Seeing none. Opposition in Elko. Seeing none. Do we have any opposition on the phones?
To testify in opposition of Assembly Bill 84, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. There are no callers to testify.
Thank you. Do we have anyone in neutral in Carson City?
Good evening, Chair Cohen and members of the committee. My name is Bob Mergell. I'm the administrator for Nevada Division of State Parks, for the record. And before I start my testimony, if the chair would like, I could address some of the questions that came up about administrative fees and annual fee costs, because my testimony is probably going to be real close to that 2-minute mark.
Please do, and you're okay if you go a little over the 2 minutes. We're okay. I'm not timing.
Thank you. I have a track record for not staying on time. So anyway, our administrative fees for the permits that do require an administrative fee, which are our senior permit and our disabled veteran permit, that administrative fee is $30. A similar permit for anybody that doesn't qualify for that, that permit would cost $250. So the only two annual permits that we offer right now for free, other than that administrative fee, is a senior permit where the person has to be 65 years of age or older and be a Nevada resident. Then they qualify for that $30 annual permit. If they're a veteran with a service-connected disability, then they can also get that virtually the same permit for that same administrative fee of $30. And so there isn't, we don't really have a free permit right now, other than those two, which do have that administrative fee connected. So I think that answered the questions, but I'm happy to answer additional questions after I actually get through this testimony, if that's appropriate. Okay. So the division is neutral with concerns on Assembly Bill 84. For context and background, NDSP, Nevada Division of State Parks, currently recognizes traditional practices and voluntarily grants free access to state parks and recreational areas to tribal members if the activity relates to traditional practices and not recreational activities. Typically, NDSP recognizes traditional practices that primarily revolve around collecting plants for traditional purposes such as willows for weaving or vegetation that may be used for homeopathic medicines. Additionally, since some of the parks have petroglyph sites, NDSP has allowed tribal members free access to connect to their ancestral past at those locations. AB 84 is much more expansive, creating a new free annual permit, waiving entrance fees to Nevada state parks and recreational access fees such as camping and boating for Nevada tribal members. This not only results in a loss of revenue and it burdens the agency with additional costs, but it also, most concertedly, sets a precedent whereby the state determines fees based on a person's race or ethnicity. Over the last year, the agency has been building partnerships and working with organizations such as Black Folks Camp 2, Latinos in Nature, Blacks in Nature, and Colors in Nature, with the goal of creating an inclusive and welcoming environment to all visitors at Nevada state parks. The lands that have been designated as state parks, recreation areas, or historical sites were set aside for the benefit of all people. The agency's ability to successfully fulfill its mission is dependent on having advocates and supporters of all users that realize the importance of protecting these lands for all future generations. Everyone must be willing to contribute to help balance the expense involved in protecting these lands. Paying minimal use and recreation fees ensures that the financial burden is not solely borne by the state and allows all users of state parks to help protect what is important to them while minimizing the impact to the rest of the taxpayers. In line with this understanding, this year, the division launched a pilot program to provide day use annual permits to every public library in the state to allow anyone who has a library card to go to their local library and check out a pass for free to get people, of course, I apologize for that. I don't know how to silence my actual watch. Annual permits to every public library in the state to allow anyone who has a library card to go to their local library and check out a pass for free to get people out into their state parks. This program allows anyone to get free access to their state parks to remove the financial barrier that may be preventing them from otherwise doing so. Once people visit the park for free, it's our belief that they will then see the benefit and see that the park is already an exceptional value at just $5 or $10 per vehicle to enter for the day. NDSP recognized the positive intent of this bill and the opportunity presents to partner and further strengthen our relationship with Nevada's tribal communities and explore integrating Native American heritage into state park interpretive and education programming. However, NDSP would be open to the concept of formalizing free access for the purposes of traditional practices and access to cultural resources. The agency maintains that all users should pay for recreational activities, though. Thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions.
We do have a couple, so I'll start off. And thank you for coming forward and your willingness to answer our questions. So if a tribal member wants to just take a walk or boat or something like that and not look at petroglyphs, not collect anything to use for regalia, not do anything religious, they would have to pay under the system right now.
Bob Mergill, for the record, as it sits right now, that's correct. Those would be considered recreational opportunities, and so, yes, we do charge a fee for that.
Okay. And I have a question from Assemblymember DeLong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Somewhat along the same lines, you said you recognize a traditional cultural properties such as petroglyphs. You can see that. You feel comfortable with that. There are many other traditional cultural properties that are landscape-based that only people with those traditions of using the land know them. How do you recognize those, or do you recognize those?
Bob Mergill, again, for the record, and thank you for the question. So right now, our local park supervisors are generally aware of that, and if there are any culturally significant sites like that, then if a tribal member came to our park staff and said, this area is important for this ritual or for this activity or for this whatever, if that's not, Cave Rock is a good example, right? So there's reasons to go there beyond just jumping in the lake. And so what it takes right now is some coordination with our park staff so that we know that that's what they're there for. And then we absolutely would waive the fee for that. Now, as I've said, it is, that is not something that is set in administrative code. It's not set in statute. It's just something that we recognize is the right thing to do, and so we do it. So hopefully that answers your question.
It did. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. I don't think we have any other questions, but thank you for coming up.
My pleasure.
Okay. Do we have anyone else in neutral? Carson City? Seeing none. Do we have anyone in Elko? Seeing none. Do we have anyone in neutral in Las Vegas? Seeing none. Do we have anyone on the phones in neutral BPS?
Testify in neutral to Assembly Bill 84. Please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers to testify.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Howard Watts for the record. I want to thank you all again for all your time today and your consideration of this measure. Just a couple of quick things. Again, I really appreciate all the incredible work that State Parks has done. But again, you know, this body has taken action recently with tuition waivers, for example, in recognizing that land-grant universities were on land granted that was taken, that Indigenous people were displaced from. Similarly, state parks are a fantastic resource. I want to make sure that those parks are resourced properly, but you know, that is something that is driving financial benefit for the state on land that Indigenous people were displaced from. And so that is why I've brought the bill forward. One last thing is, you know, even tribal membership is an imperfect measure. There's a lot of history and nuance to tribal membership and who's eligible for that, but I do feel it's one of the easiest to administer ways of ensuring that folks that have a tie to this land are able to come and visit these areas whenever they wish. And, you know, again, we do have some tribes whose boundaries encompass multiple states. Sometimes they don't have the infrastructure in the Nevada portion of their land, so they live in an adjoining state. And those members would be able to come and enjoy, because as was noted before, these people used to follow the seasons, follow the land, follow the harvest. Or even members that may have moved away, if they want to come and reconnect with their homeland, they would be able to do it under this bill. I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you all for your time, and I respectfully ask for your support.
Thank you. And with that, I will close out the hearing on AB 84, and we will go into public comment. Do we have anyone for public comment in Carson City? Okay, seeing none, we will go for public comment in Las Vegas. Seeing none, we will go for public comment in Elko. Seeing none, BPS, do we have anyone on the phones for public comment?
To provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, we have no callers to provide public comment.
Thank you, BPS. Anything from anyone on the committee? Okay, thank you. With that, we will adjourn Howard Watts Day. Have a good evening.